one man in this case to do something that was thought of as impossible. So by you raising your vibration, the ripple effect of that is massive because what you do matters, because you exist as a possibility in the field for someone else to entrain to. You are something that is not the fear, the scarcity, the weather, whatever it is that's out there. You are something of a higher resonance. So you get to inspire and to allow for others to move up in their frequency resonance or the vibration more easily. And the thing is, when we start to change who we are, our world changes. And as we each do this, the world starts to change. So living with the awakening heart is everything to me.
Hi, Karen. Welcome to the Awaken Heart podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here as well. And you've got such a wonderful smile. I was noticing that as I was perusing your website. You're just like beaming. You're just purely beaming. And for those that aren't tuned into the video, you have to watch the video portion, but she's just dressed in all these vibrant, beautiful colors. And I'm all matted and muted back here. So I'm really excited about these. I always say I'm excited because I am always excited about these conversations because they're so enlightening on so many levels. And it's just really shows us a lot of times the power that we have within ourselves when we really understand how the world reality actually works and how we realize how we have our own divine nature and how powerful we really, really are. And we're going to go into a topic that has been covered before, but I think it's so important for people to really understand and start integrating in their own life, seeing especially what the upside down world we're living in right now. When you really tune into what is happening in the world, you become of the world, but not in the world, but not of the world. Is that the right word? Or is it in the world and not of the? It's one of those things. So literally, we have the power to create whatever we want in our lives when we really can align with those higher frequencies and realize the divine nature that is within ourselves. And Karen is an expert at this. She had her own huge awakening years ago, and she had a merging with Oneness, which I'd like to hear more about, in a little bit, because people are like, well, what is Oneness? What is all that? But it's like, it becomes like, instead of a belief or a faith or it's a hope, it's a knowing, it's an actually isness, and then it becomes a part of your being. And people refer that to as ego death. You hear that a lot in shamanism and those types of practices. So Karen had, she was in the business world for a while. She went to school and part of the tech boom and, built multiple businesses. And then she realized how life and spirituality are deeply intertwined. So, Karen, I would love for my audience to hear a little bit about you and your background and what led you into this huge awakening and doing this kind of work that you're doing now.
I'm laughing because if you'd asked me even 5 or 6 years ago, what would you be doing? It wouldn't have been this. So my life took a tremendous sharp right turn, let's just say. As you said, I've been trained as an attorney. I worked through the dot-com boom and had a couple of businesses. But throughout all of that, what happened is that I learned, or I felt like I was always stuck in scarcity. So my husband, Chris, and I had a business in San Francisco where we helped people buy and sell homes. And we had a little team and the whole thing. And we had a really successful business that did really well and had a really high referral rate. Our clients loved us. And I was doing a lot of things at the time, meaning things in my personal growth realm. So a lot of personal development, which is very traditional and sort of a lot of people know about that sort of stuff, all the way out to like sort of more like woo-woo spiritual stuff. And I was implementing a lot of the different things that I learned because I was so curious, like how does energy affect our world? How does it make things better? How can we be better if we understand the unseen world in addition to what makes humans tick? So I've always been curious and implementing. And I noticed that despite doing very well on paper, so meaning we had lots of money in the bank account, we lived in San Francisco, which is an amazing city, I always felt like we didn't have enough. So I would spreadsheet almost every night, like how much money we had, how long it would last for, all that sort of stuff, because I was always freaked out that we didn't have enough. And Chris would just look at me and say, do you realize this has nothing to do with what we actually have? Because we have enough. I mean, you can see it. But it always felt like we didn't. And I was always driving him or our team or whatever to produce more. And I didn't like how it felt, despite all the tools I had. Okay, so please know that my life was looking pretty amazing, right? So it wasn't like I was miserable. It was just that internally it felt crappy.
Was that something that was maybe ingrained in you from childhood?
Yeah. And it's what I would call a distortion pattern or an unconscious block that exists at the frequency level that keeps you stuck. And so I would look at some of our peers who didn't care about their clients as much or it didn't do as well for them, and they were doing better than us. And I kept thinking, like, why is that happening? Why are they getting these clients? And why are we hitting a ceiling? And then frequency work found me because I went away for a journey in France and came back. And I happened to be at my acupuncturist office. And I was telling her about my trip. And as I got up to leave, she casually mentions to me, have you ever heard of frequency work? And in that moment, time got really slow. Kind of went like, vroom. And I even, like, as I was turning, it's almost like I could see every angle of the turn. It was kind of like almost out of the matrix, I guess. But it really was like that in my experience. And I said to her, no, but I need to. And so I started the work of clearing my own distortions. And I didn't have any outcome other than I want to stop feeling like this. That was it. It was pretty simple. I would like to not be stressed out all the time about money. That's what I would like. And it happened in a way that was very subtle at first and then picked up a lot of steam. And so just because I'm an intense kind of person, and I was just like, can we just get there? I was really intensive about my inner work. And about 2 years in, I went to a retreat in Sedona. That was a 9-day retreat, which was, no, I'm sorry, it was a 12-day retreat, which was an extraordinarily long time for me to remove myself from my business, like very, very long. And okay, but I took the time off. I went and I got to the retreat. I walked into the room and I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. I could feel the field. And I was just like, of that retreat. And I was like, it's an unstable field. I'm like, okay, but I'm supposed to be in Sedona. And I knew that I was supposed to meditate on my own, which, okay, Nancy, all of this is just bizarre because I'm the type of person who was raised to go to every class. I never skipped anything. I always took notes. I always studied my notes. And I was running scarcity patterns. So there's no way I'm going to go to a retreat that costs a lot of money and then not go to it.
For that many days. That's
and not be in my business. That's nuts.
Exactly.
So anyway, I was just like, okay, distortion patterns. I'm just not going to fall into play with you right now. And I sat down and I ended up in a meditation that was a 9-hour meditation. And I didn't ask to be in it. I didn't plan to be in it. I was just in it. And I certainly didn't know I was in there for 9 hours until after I came out of it. And then that is when I had that experience that you mentioned, where for the first time I merged into the one. And at that level where there was really no me anymore. And it felt like I knew everything and everything was part of me and I was part of everything because there really was no I, at first I laughed because I couldn't believe that I'd forgotten something that's so intrinsic. It's like, how do you forget how to breathe? It's just part of you. And then I cried because I couldn't believe that I'd forgotten that. And in any case, in that meditation, I perceived everything as frequencies. Everything was vibrating and I could feel, sense, be aware of it know it. And I also had the very clear understanding and realization that you can shift things at this level. And then when I came back from that 9-hour meditation, meaning, became aware of myself in this little studio in Sedona, it was really odd because I could perceive the illusion, and I could perceive how beautiful it was and how magnificent and intricate and incredibly detailed it was for us to learn and grow from. And it was like in the scenes from the movie The Matrix, where he puts his hand through the mirror or the glass or whatever, and it kind of goes like this. It felt like I could do that. And anyway, so when the other thing that happened is when I came back from that meditation, so to speak, not that I left, but you know what I mean? The me that was me was no longer me in the same way. I realized I could still perceive everything at the frequency level, which surprised me because I wasn't expecting anything, but I certainly wasn't expecting that. And then I realized I could shift things at the frequency level. And it was really odd because within 12 hours of me having that meditation, like the next day, like literally almost 12 hours, a friend who I hadn't seen in years came to visit me because she happened to be overlapping with me for just that day. And she asked me for my help, and I did. And that's how it began. I didn't advertise. I didn't, you know what I mean? I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just helping a friend. And then she told her friends, and all of a sudden all these people started calling me. And that's
Isn't
how it
that
began.
funny how that works? It's just like you don't have to hustle and push hard to attract those people that want to work with you or do your work, and they just came to you. So you're saying that she was overlapping. Was she there just on her own personal retreat, or
Yeah.
you just happened to be there at the same time?
She happened to be, I hadn't seen this woman
Wow.
in probably 8 years. We happened to connect for lunch randomly in San Francisco before I left. We discovered we were going to be in Sedona at the same time, overlapping for like literally a day.
Wow.
And that was it. Like, I haven't seen this woman for 8 years.
Synchronicity, boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So when the magic lines up, I mean, you can't plan that. It just happens. So yeah.
That's really incredible. And there's something about how you had paid to go on that retreat. Yeah, you had to pay a lot of money to go on this 12-day retreat that you didn't go to, but it led you to Sedona. Had you been to Sedona before?
Yeah.
It's
and
so magical.
Been a special place.
Yeah, it's a very
absolutely
special place.
Magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had your ego death, you had your awakening. So you're talking about, I can clearly see that image of you sticking your hand through that mirror and it just waving. So you said you came out of it and you still were able to see the frequency and vibration and how it's this beautiful, intricate illusion. Can you describe that a little more? How that would look to you?
Yeah. So to me, what it felt like was I could see the physicalness of the beauty of Sedona, which is, by the way, a naturally beautiful place for anybody who's not been. So it's stunning. And it literally, to me, this is a feeling sense, felt like it was a skin, like the canvas of a painting. And behind it, there's something else. So it literally felt like that. So I was like, oh, this isn't real. I just had this knowingness. I'm like, I felt the illusion for the first time, really. Because I'd heard of that concept before. The reality is an illusion. Life is an illusion, like this whole thing that we hear about a lot. And I was like, I don't even know what the hell that means because it feels pretty real to me. I don't know. But it's a feeling sense. So I was like, so I just had the sense of the intricacy of it all and how even I started to see the construct behind the reality, like how vibration creates the illusion, how light creates the illusion, all that sort of stuff, how everything is vibrating. It's hard to describe, really, but it's more of a feeling sense, an awareness sense than an actual like physical seeing, if that makes sense.
So you're looking at an object, you're looking at the mountains of Sedona and you see that, but there's something vibrating and that's energy behind it. It's vibrating and frequenting. No, that's not a word.
Yeah. It's all frequency, resonance, and vibration. It's all light vibrating at different rates.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
There's been times where I have seen, I mean, everything's supposed to be moving like desks. It's just such a crazy concept. I mean, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, it's just mind blowing. Like anything solid, it's not really solid. It's just a bunch of stuff, vibrating together. And we're only be able to see a lot of these things because we're on a lower density, and everything's available to us if we just raise our frequency and vibration. So yeah. And then we always hear about how everything's happening at the same time. Everything that we ever wanted is already here. Nothing's created or ever destroyed. It's just here. And it's just aligning to that which is already available to you. So people that are already operating in lack, which a lot of us are, and people, so many people aren't even aware of it, but a lot of people are aware of these concepts and aware of frequency and vibration. They don't know how to quite get there. So how can somebody start raising their own frequency and their vibration to align to something that they have such a, they can envision in their minds, and they want to align with their greatest desires?
Yeah. So you have to understand distortion patterns, I think, in order to get to what it is that you're
like the shadow.
Yes, exactly. So as you just said so beautifully, everything is vibrating. From my perspective, everything is vibrating. What determines what something is the rate of vibration. So your audience probably knows this already, but just as an example, if you take, for example, water, and the molecules are vibrating very fast, it's steam, and when those molecules slow down in vibration, it becomes liquid water, and as that vibration slows down more, it becomes solid ice or density or physicalness. So if you extrapolate that, just like you mentioned, all the way out to consciousness, or let's call it the all that is, pure source, the divine, whatever you want to call that very highly resonating consciousness from which everything comes and to which everything returns, or what I call the oneness, vibrates at an extraordinarily high rate. We can't yet measure it with our physical tools because it's vibrating so fast. So when that oneness wants to experience something other than oneness, it has to drop in vibrational order. And so when that happens, there's something that are called frequencies that are created. And when that vibrational level slows down, it becomes something that we call energy, now anyway, when we talk about it. And when that slows down even more, it becomes physical form or matter. So everything happens at the frequency level first. And the physical reorganizes around what happens at the frequency level. So if you can work at the frequency level, change can happen much more quickly because the physical will reorganize around it. So to your question, so then why the heck can't I get what it is that I can so clearly feel? Distortion patterns. So from my perspective, what happens is that when you choose to come into embodiment, now I know for a lot of people, they'll roll their eyes because they're like, okay, well, I don't know that I really wanted to experience this, because there's not always just glory that happens in the human experience, clearly.
But at some level, you did.
Exactly. Because you have to remember, form is extraordinarily rare. The scientists will say that 99.999999999% of everything is quote unquote nothing, meaning not form, and 0.0000001 is form. So you get to experience something that is extraordinarily rare, even though it is messy and can be hard at times. So in any case, when you choose to come into embodiment, you have to drop in vibrational level because you've gone from consciousness to embodiment. So here you are, this sphere, to me, what looks like a sphere of pure source energy vibrating at a very unique rate, which is what we call individuation. It's what makes you, you, and me. So when that sphere drops in vibration and comes into embodiment, what happens to me is what looks like layers and 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 layers of duct tape form around the sphere. Now, a couple things happen to the sphere. The sphere itself is still pure source energy vibrating its own unique rate. But what happens is two key things. One, it forgets that it's surrounded by pure source energy in all directions around it. And the other thing is it starts to slow down in its vibration because it's heavy with the layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of duct tape. So what are the layers of duct tape? So here are the distortion patterns. So it's a metaphor for like these things that I call distortion patterns that are caused by things like your lineage or what your ancestors experienced. And this is the field of epigenetics, where they're starting to discover that what your ancestors experienced very much impact how your genes express now and the choices that you make now. So what your lineage experienced is a distortion pattern that you experience now. And then, of course, there are cultural distortion patterns. There are religious distortion patterns. Even if you didn't grow up in a particularly religious household, your ancestors did, and it trickles down to you. So that adds to the layers of duct tape. Then, of course, there are things like past lives, and then your past life lineage. So all of that creates these layers of duct tape. So the amazing thing about right now, even though the world looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket, is that consciousness is rising and we have the opportunity to wake up. And what the heck does that mean? You know, a lot of people talk about awakening. Awakening to me just means that you recognize or realize or feel like you are more than just your physicalness, that you are infinite, indestructible consciousness, and that you don't have to feel it all the time to be awake, just aware of it, you know, at some level, and enough for you to recognize that you're not just the physicalness, that's you. So everyone thinks that awakening is like a Buddha awakening, but awakening happens at different levels on a spectrum. I mean, you know this, you've experienced this yourself. You know, you have like little awakenings that lead to realizations, and then your life changes. And then a little bit later on, another awakening happens. Do you see what I'm saying? It's everyone thinks it's like a thing, and then all of a sudden you'll be free and liberated. It's not that, it's a
spiral.
Yeah, exactly. So in any case, once you can release your distortion patterns, because we're now at a point in consciousness where consciousness is high enough that someone like me can work at the level of frequency. When you release the distortion patterns at the level of frequency, then everything changes at the physical level. Why? Because your vibrational level, that sphere within the duct tape, starts to vibrate faster because the duct tape starts to peel off. And now the sphere can pick up speed. Exactly. And the sphere that's you is not like, sweet, I love this heaviness. It's amazing. The sphere is like, wow, this feels really good to not have this. And also it clarifies our ability to manifest. Because you can be an incredibly good manifester, but if you are running distortion, it's going to hijack your manifestation. It just will, because the distortion is running through your field and you are trying to create. So what are you doing? You're creating it within the distortion of your field. It's not like you're asked for it. It's just running through you, but there it is, impacting everything about you, including what it is that you manifest. So to go back to your original question, okay, well, I can feel the thing that I wanted to create, but why can't I manifest it? Because those distortions run through you. And if you can release the distortion patterns, then your ability to manifest clarifies. And it's shocking how fast the physical can reorganize, like completely around you, just for making what seem like internal shifts, but they're massive.
And we've seen some master manifestors. I mean, Jesus was one of them that just,
Absolutely.
well, he knew who he was. He knew what he was.
Absolutely.
Divine source, like instantaneous. And he was trying to show us all what we had the ability to be.
Absolutely.
And we had that all within us. So I've heard that it can happen like that. And
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So how would somebody go about, I mean, distortion pattern, it's your shadow, or what are some other I understand that it's just taken to another level, like the whole distortion pattern around your energetic level. I think that's such a cool way of looking at it, because we've heard about our shadow, which we all have one, or we've heard about our inner wounds or our wounded child and all that. It's all within us, but then it's all radiating outward into our field, which is the distortion pattern. So how would you lead somebody to begin working with that distortion pattern, start taking the duct tape off?
Yeah, it's awesome. So so I just want to preface this by saying I'm very much from a lineage that's all about hard work. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Some
And it's
Chinese
going to
in
be
my
hard
descent.
work.
Yeah.
Work
So
hard.
it's like yeah, exactly. So if you want something, you're just going to work your tail off to get it.
Yeah.
That's generally how it is, at least in my lineage. So anyway, it's shockingly easier than you would think.
Mm.
And it has to do more with how much you can be aware of yourself once you've received the work, and if you're willing to do what I call confirm the removal. So to do the work or to participate in frequency work, you just basically have to listen. So essentially, it will sound like a guided meditation. So you'll put on your earbuds or whatever it is. And typically, the work that I do is in groups. So it tends to be like an online class, or I have my own podcast, for example, which is free. We have over 200 episodes now. And after each episode, we have, or I give, a free, what I call group frequency calibration, which is where I do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of work out there for free, and you just start to listen to it. Now, a lot of people, including myself when I started, would have been like, okay. So what's the catch? There is none. And if you listen to the meditation, what you'll notice is that things will come up in your life, because it's not just a meditation. I'm working with you at frequency level, and you're really basically joining a mastermind that is working to release a very specific set of distortions and become more aware of your connection to pure source. Really, that's it. And to basically raise your vibrational level. So what happens as you listen to it, so some people fall asleep, some people need to move a bit, and that's fine. Some people just sit, and that's fine. But what happens is that life will present you opportunity to do what I call confirming the removal of the pattern. So let's just imagine that you have an issue with low self-worth. Okay? So it's a challenge for you. It's really difficult for you to say no or to hold boundaries. And it's just hard because people come into your space a lot, meaning they ask a lot from you and you feel like extracted from sometimes, and you have a hard time saying no to that, etc. What happens is you start to listen to the meditations, and you'll notice in your life that somebody will try to do that. And then you have the choice to say, because you'll recognize what's happening. And you're like, no, that's no longer mine. Because you're recognizing your authority as co-creator. And you're like, that's not mine. And you choose to do something different in that moment. And by doing that, you are asserting, like I said, your authority as co-creator. And what happens is that as people do this more and more, the speed of their own vibrational level gets higher and higher. So the depth at which they can clear certain patterns gets greater, because distortion patterns are very unique to us. Like what triggers you doesn't trigger me, right? So you may have a trouble, I'm not saying this is true, but you may have trouble with relationship and it's not trouble for me. But I might have trouble with, I don't know, career stuff, and it's not a problem for you. Do you see what I'm saying? Like what triggers each of us is different because it's very specific to our distortion patterns. So you can release these different things at different and greater speeds, because some of them come in deeper layers for us where it's stickier. So when you release that, it becomes really glorious. And I'm just going to give you a little example of this. So, or two, because they're amazing. So one is that I have a client who, she is an amazing woman. She's like one of your friends that you're like, she's amazing. She's hilarious. She's adventurous. She's a successful businesswoman. She's pretty. She's outgoing. And she's just a lovely human being. Okay. Just like all out amazingness. And she also has trouble in intimate partnership. Okay. So she came to me because, and we'd all noticed this as friends of hers, that she always ended up with guys who were kind of like jackasses, right? So either emotionally unavailable or emotionally abusive. So she would go around doing like backflips for the guy. She would cook for him, take his dog for walks, like organize his vacations, all that stuff. And it was the guys were always different. It's not like she only dated one man, but they looked different, but they were kind of flavors of the same thing. So anyhow, she'd just broken up with someone, and she's like, okay, that's it. I'm starting frequency work. I can't handle it anymore. I'm not doing this. Like, I would just rather be single for the rest of my life. I can't handle it anymore. So she's like, I'm going on a break for men, and I'm just going to work on myself. So she started frequency work. And so she did a combination of individual work and a lot of group work, where She was clearing a lot of things having to do with low self-worth, her ability to receive love, and a whole bunch of other things related to that. Okay. And feeling guilty and bad when people were asking her for things and she couldn't say no. Anyway, for her, it took a while because it was such a deep set thing for her. I think about 8 months in, she's like, okay, I think I'm ready to date. I'm like, okay, great. So she puts her stuff out there. She's like, I'm just going to see how my inner work is. Like, how do I respond to guys? Like, I don't have to be with them forever. I'm just going to see how it goes. So her friends put her on an online thingy, okay? Like an online, like a couple of online sites. And so she's pretty. So within like 24 hours, she has 2 coffee dates with 2 guys, okay, back to back, meaning one on, say, like a Wednesday and one on like a Thursday. Man number 1 on Wednesday. She's like, okay, Karen, you won't believe it. So this is the type of guy I totally would have fallen for in the past. I could see it. I knew what patterns he was running. I could see myself almost feel like I should be attracted to him. But then I realized, wait a minute, that's not my pattern anymore. So maybe we'll be friends, but I decided to say no to that guy. And she was so proud of herself because before she would have been like, sign me up. Man number 2, coffee date number 2. She's like, okay, so this guy, not attracted to him. Like, really, like if you put down a list of criteria of like what I would be attracted to, this would not be this man. But we had the best time. We sat there, we talked for 2.5 hours. We're going on another date. Okay, and it spirals. Like within 3 months, they're going camping together and they went on a trip, blah, blah, blah. Within a year, they're married. And what's amazing, it's not the marriage part, because that's not the success bit. The success part is for her to say to me, every day I wake up and I pinch myself because I cannot believe this is my life. And I know that he loves me. I don't have to do anything. He just wants to make me happy. I don't have to do everything for him. I can just receive that and let him. She goes, I know it sounds weird to say it, let him, but truly, but it gives him pleasure to make me happy. And I can receive it. That has never happened in my life before. So that's the win. It's not the marriage. It's how she feels about herself, right? And then how she feels about her life. That to me is like the spectacular part. And that's like a huge, I mean, when she started, she was in her, she was 46, I think, when she started. I mean, it wasn't like she was 25. I mean, the woman has had multiple, longer term relationships, and this is a huge pattern that she was clearing. So that was amazing. And the second story, if you'll indulge me,
I would love to hear,
was this woman, young woman, she was very late 20s, and she came to see me for something completely unrelated. So she came in, I do give a small number of individual frequency calibrations. So she came in for something. And when I scanned her, so I never see my clients. So everyone's like, why do you do it on Zoom? I'm like, because I'm not looking at you physically. I honestly, I mean, who you are and what you look like is wonderful, but it is not required for me to do my work. I'm scanning the field for the frequency resonance of you, then I'm responding to your higher self in terms of priority. It has nothing to do with what I want as an outcome for you, and it has nothing to do with you and your ego mind thinks is an outcome for you. Sorry to tell you that, that's what it is. So anyway, so this woman comes in and we work on something. I don't even remember what the thingy is. So I have a call with her. So it's on a phone call. I don't see her. I'm just hearing her voice. So she writes in the next day. She's like, okay, I really don't understand what happened in our session. I'm like, and so because this is what happens. So what she goes on to describe is she's a white woman, and her partner is an African-American man. And she has a relationship with her mother, which is close but tense. Okay, so very loving, but her mom is very critical of her and not very supportive. So a few hours after our session, her mom calls her, which is weird in itself because she always calls mom. Mom never calls her. And mom also really, really hates that her daughter is dating an African-American man. Really hates it. Okay. So in any case, mom calls this woman and the woman's like, okay, this is weird. Okay. So she starts talking to her mother, and her mother says, I'm so proud of you. You know, it really has taken so much courage for you to get to where you are, and now you're living in this place, and I never thought you would be able to do such a thing. But she's very complimentary. Literally, the woman is like, took the phone away from her ear and looked at the number to check. She's like, who is this? Who am I talking
Oh my
to?
gosh.
And then her mother says, I'm so pleased you're with your partner.
Mm.
He's amazing for you. He's so supportive. And the woman's just like, what? Thank God. She's like, is this a joke? Like, this has got to be a joke. Like, I don't even stand in this bubble. So she writes in and she's like, I don't understand what happened. Okay. What happened is this. She jumped in her vibrational level. Okay. I know this is going to be a stretch for some people, but what happens when you want to release your distortion patterns and you are not in fear and you want to watch your habituation, your vibrational level can jump really high. What happens? Your vibrational level is the key to what reality and what life experience you get to experience. She literally moved into a different life experience, a different version of her life, or what we would call like a different timeline. And she was in a different timeline where her mother is different. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but it's kind of like, you know,
I
those
totally
movies.
understand
you
it.
know?
No, it's like glass
Yeah.
mirrors, like all your realities
Yes.
are
Yes.
next to you. You
Yes.
can see that one, but it doesn't affect you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're like, whoa. And so in this version of her reality, at this higher frequency resonance, her mother is not the same.
Mm.
Her mother is supportive, likes her partner, you know, and it's just totally a different person.
Wow.
But her mind was like, you know, because
Yeah.
she's just like, I don't even understand because we didn't work on my mom. I'm like, you don't have to. All you did was rise enough in your vibrational level that you switched into a different timeline.
Wow.
That's what can happen.
That is so cool. I've always heard about like timeline, the timeline's being hijacked or you're on different timelines. You
Yeah.
raise it, it's your next reality. You choose the reality according to your vibration. There's a prime example of it. That's so cool to actually hear that. So, because I've always thought, well, you change your own energy, the world changes around you because they're affected by your energy, but you're actually just switching timelines and going to one where it's, a higher timeline. Can you explain that? Like the timelines? I know there's quantum leaping and quantum leaps. And we've seen a lot of this in TV lately. And I always believe that TV is like programming. It's programming you for stuff that's already happening out there or what they're intending for us. But, we're on this higher timeline. So we can look at that and be like, yeah, that's not going to affect my world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So to me, quantum leaping and timeline jumping are very different. Okay. So as I mentioned before, to me, everything is dictated by your resonance, meaning how high your vibrational level is. Okay, that's a different way of saying it. So the higher and higher you get in your vibrational level, the more you have authority over what you get to choose in terms of what you want to experience. So I'm just going to define these two things in case it's helpful for people to give context. So quantum leaping to me means that you're of a high enough vibrational order that you can actually experience different levels of consciousness. That is what it means to go quantum. It means that you understand that you're not bound by the rules of physicalness in terms of your consciousness, meaning we think of as movement as a physical thing, like you have to cross space and it takes a certain amount of time. For example, for me to walk from here to the door. But when you get to a high enough vibrational level, you recognize that you don't need that same set of parameters. You can expand your consciousness into any space, anytime, anywhere. This is what Joe Dispenza teaches.
Yeah. It's like not space time, but it's time space or
time space.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you don't need movement, which is what, humans are very attached to as an idea. Okay. But when you start to get to the vibrational order that you can start to be able to modulate your own frequency resonance, that you recognize you can shift into a different consciousness level, not by moving your physicalness, but by simply shifting your frequency resonance, then you can experience different levels of consciousness. That is what I call quantum leaping. Okay. So to me, it's all about experiencing different levels of consciousness. Now, what the heck does that mean? So consciousness is just a vibrational level. That's it, right? I mean, you know this, right? So it's just certain vibrational levels that are held in the field. and you just start to access higher and higher level ones. So an example of this would be, for example, as you move up into a higher consciousness level, this consciousness level, which many people exist at, and lower orders, is filled with oppression and greed and scarcity and lack and all this sort of thing. Yes? And people do horrible things to each other. And if you notice, some people are existing in it, like they experience very viscerally that oppression, the greed, the whatever, the horrible things that happen. Yes? And then other people experience something different because they don't have the same distortion around it, and they vibrate generally higher. As you move into, and by the way, this is not about deserving, okay? Please know, I'm not saying that at all. It has to do with vibrational level. That's it. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we call the old consciousness level. Yes. So as you move into a new consciousness level, that people talk about a lot, like what the hell does that mean? It just means that the set point of that vibration is much higher, where those heavier, denser vibrations of fear, oppression, greed, abuse, whatever all these horrible things, don't exist at that level of vibration. It cannot. They are too dense. Make sense? So what does that mean on a felt level? It means that you start to experience more of the oneness and that you are part of the one. So what does that mean? It means how I treat you matters, because how I treat you impacts me, because I feel and I'm aware that we are one. So if you do that on an individual level and you start to extrapolate that to a collective, how we treat each other, how we treat the earth, how we want to advance as communities completely changes. That's a higher level order of consciousness, right? You don't need to hoard in the same way. You don't need to oppress. You don't need, it just doesn't exist, because your vibration level is high enough at that consciousness level that you don't need to operate like that. Why? If you're part of the oneness, you have access to everything, you're infinitely abundant. Why do I need to deny you access to something? Do you see what I'm saying? Everything changes in terms of the framework of how we think, how we relate to people, how we treat each other, what we create in the world. Everything shifts. So that to me is quantum jumping, when you start to be able to move your consciousness into higher levels of consciousness. Quantum leaping, I mean, sorry. Timeline jumping is something that you can do at this level of consciousness. Again, it has to do with vibrational level. So as you and I just talked about, there are infinite timelines in the field. What dictates your access to certain timelines has to do with your vibrational level. That's it. So everyone thinks it's very dramatic, like in the movies, it's like, like the butterfly effect with Ashton Kutcher, or there was like sliding doors, Gwyneth Paltrow, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You make a choice, and then there's like this ripple effect that goes through. Okay. So, and people think of it as very dramatic, like in one timeline, you have your mom, and then the next timeline, she's dead. You know what I mean? Or something like this. But you have to remember the timelines are infinite. So the differences in the timelines can be very nuanced and very minute, just like that woman. It's like the timeline her mother was in the first one, she was a certain kind of way. And the next day, she's in a different timeline. It's not like her mother's dead. She's just a different version of her, right? So as you get into higher levels of vibration, you get to access higher vibrating timelines. What does that mean? It means the people who show up for you will be different. And it's kind of interesting how much we can attach to our expectation of how we want people to be. So that's another thing with frequency work, is to release your expectation. But my point is, you can start to experience timelines where the people who you already know change, but then also the synchronicities that show up, the magic that shows up for you, the abundance that opens up for you, starts to spiral upwards, as you said, because you're now in timelines where you have a totally different trajectory. I mean, just think of all those times where you have said yes instead of no, and all of a sudden your life is different. And it's like a small yes. It's not like, you think you're making a massive life decision. It might be like, I don't know, you decide to go a retreat or you don't, or you're late one day for work by accident, and then something happens and you make a choice, and that choice ripples out into your entire experience. So we all make choices in our lives. We know where they are, where we've said yes or no, and we're like, wow, everything in my life is totally different, and I can actually pin it to this moment in time. So we all timeline jump to some degree. Some of us do it more. And as you jump in your vibration, so meaning for those of you who are really growth oriented and very spiritually inclined, you'll notice that you'll have more and more of them. as your vibration rises, which is really awesome. And then you get to the point where your vibration is high enough. And this is what, in part, I teach is like, this is an advanced class. It's like, can you choose your timeline? Yes. It's all about being able to master your frequency resonance.
Mm-hmm. And that's just an incredible thing. We've heard about, there is a lot going on in the world. It's very dense,
Totally.
but then there's a whole other, like the awakenings happening. So many people are raising their consciousness and, choosing these different timelines and this new earth that's going to be beautiful because it is the way we relate to each other. We all know that we all have everything that we could ever want and create. And so does the other person. So there's not lack within the society. We're not identifying with something as yourself as less them or all that stuff that's going down on the lower levels. So it's pretty, I can see it's pretty incredible how that can happen. I can't wait for that to happen. So how does, it is happening. It is happening.
It is happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
But on a simpler level here as well, how to not be affected by people and circumstances around you. So a lot of us, I've learned finally, because I rabbit holed for 2 years, like I was always like, I don't want to be in the collective consciousness of fear and all that. And I was always like that. And then I woke up to what was going on in the world during the pandemic. I was like, what in the hell? And I rabbit holed for 2 years, like where I get dragged. I'm like, oh my God, war in the world.
Yeah.
So that was part of my awakening. And now I can like, okay, well, what's going on? Okay, let me see what's going on. So I know the history, I know it. And then I know when I'm about to be pulled down, like, okay, I know everything I need to know. I can't be pulled into this anymore. And then I pull myself out of it. So a lot of people are being affected by what's going on in the world. But even on more personal level, which a lot of people experience as the holidays come on, the dynamics within family circles. So when you're raising yourself, obviously, to this higher level, you're not affected. You either experience them on a different timeline or you're not experiencing them the same way because you're recognizing the patterns that they're running and such.
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing about frequency work is that, in a lot of spiritual traditions, there's a negation of the body, right? It's all like about doing the spiritual work and awakening. And the physical body is like to be negated in some way because it's heavy or hard or sinful or whatever you want to call it, whatever. But the thing about frequency work and the amazing thing about consciousness rising is we start to understand that our humanness is a gift. I'm not saying it's glorious all the time because it's freaking hard sometimes, right? So I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that it's not about negating the body. So why do I mention this? Because frequency work, when you start to clear your distortion, you start to do something that I call internally strengthening. So meaning you become very aware of your center and you become very aware of the space of within what I call your spirit body, which is a sphere at arm's length all around you. And as you do more of frequency work and you clear more and more and more of your distortion, what happens is the walls of the sphere of your spirit body, which are all light, basically, become really, really tightly woven. So instead of, for some people, it's very porous, right? And people can come in and they feel a lot. So those of you who are empathic and you can't really quite tell the difference between you and someone else, that's what happens often with empaths, and they get kind of overwhelmed with everything that's happening around them because they can just feel everything. So what's amazing is that with frequency work, you start to tighten up that sphere of the spirit body and you recognize your own center. And you start to recognize that when something that isn't yours comes into your space, you don't have to have it there. It's your space. It's sacred. It's for you. And that is, I guess you can call it a bubble, but to me, it's a sphere of your own frequency resonance. And it's about releasing this attachment to, a lot of us have this distortion of making other people feel really comfortable, or making sure that we don't hurt their feelings, or we feel bad when they don't come into our space. It's to recognize that your own space, meaning within your spirit body, all the way into your center, is for you. And the higher your frequency resonance is, the better you will feel. And the more, as you said earlier at the very beginning, the better people around you feel. So if you start to feel them coming into your space, you can push them out. Now, I know that sounds harsh to some people. However, you have to understand that you dropping in your frequency resonance doesn't help anybody. Now you have them doing whatever they're doing, and now you feel like crap and your resonance is lower. It doesn't help anybody. Everyone's like in this low state, spinning around, and it's like not good for anybody. So what's awesome is as you release your distortion patterns around not feeling worthy or not being able to hold your space or feeling bad or taking on other people's stuff or whatever it is that you run, once you start to clear that, you recognize, it's so funny. It's for some people it's subtle, and for some people it's like super clear right away. They're like, I am no longer willing to sacrifice myself. And that's another pattern, by the way, that we release a lot is self-sacrifice. I am not willing to sacrifice myself because you feel uncomfortable. I'm just not willing to do it anymore. And I honor your experience. I will sit in presence with you as you have your experience. If you ask for my help, I will give it to you, but you are no longer allowed to come into my space. You're not. And I think for a lot of women, that's something that, and I'm not saying men don't experience this because they do too, but for women, we're like taught like to be nice. We have to allow that. I don't know why that became part of the programming for women, but you know, for a lot of women, this is the experience they have.
Be a nice girl. You're a nice girl.
Be a nice girl. Yeah, exactly. And so that means you get to like dump your heavy emotions, your stress, your whatever into me. And that's not okay. Yeah.
Yeah, having that solid core. I like the visual of it. Like, you know, this sphere of light, and some have holes, and then some like a solid ball. Because as we mentioned before, I mentioned before we hit record, and I'm dealing with my sister right now, and it's there where I was like not being able to sleep, and you know I was going through this loop, and I'm like, why was I brought back here? And but I know exactly why. Exactly. I mean, it's even more clear because these are the things that I need to work within myself. I know there was always a spiritual lesson to it. Why am I brought here by somebody that tormented me my whole life, and now she's tormenting me now? But she's not, because the last interaction, because it became so like I'm like, couldn't sleep, waking up in the middle of the night and all that. And that's not me. I had gotten out of my spiritual practice. I'm like, Nancy, you know what to do. You're allowing this, you know, we got to change the vibration, the energy. And just the recent interaction that just happened, like she went through her crazy spiral loop and everything, couldn't get a word in edgewise, but I wasn't as affected after. I didn't like ruminate. I didn't talk about, my legs were shaking, of course, when I left, but I saw clearly that she's just stuck in this loop that she won't get out of. And she even tried to throw something really personal at me. That's in a time like, Becky, that doesn't hurt me because you go for the jugular, but you know, that doesn't hurt me because I don't care about that, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that was just a small, I'm like, maybe some of the work I've been doing did work. Keep working.
Absolutely.
Keep working. So it doesn't affect. Unfortunately, I can't just, if she was a quote unquote friend, she wouldn't be in my life anymore, but she's my sister. And I have to see my mom. So I still have to, I avoid being in her environment, but I have to be in her environment sometimes. And I can't hope for her to change. I always try to give her these tools, but she just takes it and inverts it and throws it back in my face. So there's nothing I can do. I don't know if she'll ever awaken, but it's just protecting my own energy and not getting dragged down with it. And I was getting dragged down by it.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing awareness that you even knew that was happening, first of all. So
I saw him like, whoa, here we go again. I'm spinning around and around.
Exactly. And you're like, I don't think I want to do this with you anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm not done. I see it.
Yeah. So what's awesome about frequency work is that, as you say, family is our greatest challenge sometimes, some of our greatest teachings, at least in my experience, has been with family. Because you say you have less choice.
Yeah, because they're family.
Interaction.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is that as you release the distortions and your vibration gets higher and you become internally stronger, I knew, for example, that I had changed because I would be in the field of somebody who's a family member who used to trigger me. And that's the amazing thing about frequency work. You're like, doesn't trigger me. Just isn't there. Like the trigger is gone because the trigger is, from my perspective anyway, an indication of a distortion pattern that needs to be released. Absolutely. So when you release the distortion pattern, the trigger isn't there, and it's amazing. So, yeah, it is freedom. And now, am I saying you're never going to be triggered again in your lifetime? Of course not. You are human. You know, I am human. Like we all have these things where you're like, oh, there that pattern was. And as you say, it's a spiritual teaching. So you're just like, okay, let me find it. Let me find the distortion. I'm going to release it. And then, you know, next time it's not there. So it's great. You know, you just keep learning, which I think is an awesome opportunity.
I think it is too. We always our good learning. It's always learning, study, learning, and becoming. I love it. I want everybody to work with you because I really can see how our whole world can change, and that's what they always say is like change happens within it, one person at a time. As you change yourself, others change as well. So I think this is wonderful. And I'd love for my audience to know how they can find you, work with you. I know you have a lot of online programs, courses, live retreats, and you have your podcast, Mastering Your World Through Frequency. And I just signed up for the 45-year video. And I think it's going to get emailed as well. And you've got a meditation, which I'm going to start myself. But you've got so many videos up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question, you can find me on my website at sphericalluminosity.com.
I love that name. Oops, now I understand that name. I knocked my microphone. Now I understand. I was writing that down before we hit record. The spherical luminosity. Wow.
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah. It's that duct tape that's come up.
That's right.
That it
is. Totally. So that is the website. You can find our podcast on YouTube under Spherical Luminosity or on our website. You can also, for your audience, if they would like it, we have a free Quiet Your Mind workshop. So it tells you why your mind is going like 50 miles an hour and you can't sleep, etc. And then more importantly, there is the Quiet Your Mind group frequency calibration meditation, which follows, which is really powerful, which will help you to quiet your mind. So there's that, if your audience would like that. And then we also have a ebook and audiobook called Creation Manifestation, Why It Fails and What to Do About It. And in addition to that, there's also what is my most popular meditation, morning meditation, setting the tone of the day, which is 15 minutes, I think, or just under. And if you listen to it first thing in the morning, it sets your frequency resonance or your vibrational level at the highest level possible. So that means that your day that you're going to have will be different and how you are in it will be different. So all of that is a value of $55, but for your audience, if they use the coupon code HEART, they will get that all for free.
Coupon code. And they can find that on your website?
Yeah, or if you could put it in your show notes, I'll send you the links.
No. I mean, yeah, I'm going to definitely put in my show notes, but that's also on your website as well, right?
Yep.
For people to go to your website. Yeah, I'm going to have all this in the show notes because I'm signing up.
Thank you.
That's why I asked about the website because I'm going right to your website. So wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. I have one more question before we go. And that is, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
Freedom.
Oh.
Yeah. And freedom to me is many things because it means that you know your true essence. It, to me, means like freedom from a bunch of different kinds of fear because it's no longer concern anymore because you recognize that you're infinite indestructible consciousness having a human experience, which is said a lot, but you really freaking feel it, like for real. And it means the freedom to be who you truly are because we have so much concern often that we have to be different or better or something else, that we're not enough. But when you have an awakened heart, you have the freedom to be you in all of the messiness, in your authenticity, in your glory of being human. And all of that is okay and is something to be celebrated, not something to beat yourself up about. So to live within the awakened heart also means that your mind isn't the dominant thing. Your heart is the dominant force. So I'm not suggesting your mind isn't irrelevant because your mind is a very helpful tool. You need it to do things like plan and eat dinner. Like, what are you going to eat for dinner? You know? So obviously you need your mind. But when you have the awakened heart, that becomes the force of your life, meaning you're called to things. You start to follow things or callings, even if you're scared. It's okay that you're scared because there's something in you that knows that you have to. And even the mind is freaking out. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it even though I'm freaked out and the mind is telling me no. So it also, to me, means freedom has to do with freedom of generosity. Because you start to recognize it's not really about, it is and it isn't about the you. So it's about the you being the glorious you, the highest vibration possible. And it's really about so much more too, that you get to live and experience, you know? So I don't know if that was particularly clear, but it just means that you, even though you don't think you're making a difference, can have tremendous impact on someone's life, even in what seem like your casual conversations. Like you never know what the impact is of a casual conversation. So let's just say you have a conversation with someone, they're bagging your groceries, and who you are is different that day because you're in your heart, awakened heart space and not in your mind. Maybe that day they're more present for their kid. Maybe that day they're thinking of committing suicide and they don't. You don't know the impact of your casual conversations. So you get to be free in your generosity of spirit of who you are. Because just like you said, who we are matters and it ripples out. Because just like this very famous example, you know, we all thought that running the 4-minute mile was impossible. And then this guy named Roger Bannister runs the mile in less, is it 7-minute mile? Some 4-minute mile. And he runs the mile in less than 4 minutes. And then all of a sudden, more and more people start to run the 4-minute mile. And now some people are running a marathon in less than 2 hours, which is like mind-blowing. But my point is, it took one man in this case to do something that was thought of as impossible. So by you raising your vibration, the ripple effect of that is massive because what you do matters, because you exist as a possibility in the field for someone else to entrain to. You are something that is not the fear, the scarcity, the weather, whatever it is that's out there. You are something of a higher resonance. So you get to inspire and to allow for others to move up in their frequency resonance or their vibration more easily. And the thing is, when we start to change who we are, our world changes. And as we each do this, the world starts to change. So living with the awakening heart is everything to me.
What a beautiful, beautiful explanation of the awakened heart. I love it. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming on the Awakened Heart podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
You got such an awesome smile. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.